The girl walked into the cafe quietly, her small hands clutching the strap of her bag tightly. She had been here before, but today felt different. Today, something inside her made her walk toward the piano in the corner of the room. The cafe was busy, filled with the usual hum of conversation, clinking cups, and laughter. But as soon as she approached the piano, the room seemed to shift, even if only for a moment. A few people noticed her and exchanged glances, some smiling, some shaking their heads, as if they already knew what would happen. She could feel the eyes on her, and for a moment, she froze. It was not fear exactly, more like the weight of everyone's expectation, or in this case, their lack of expectation. They did not expect her to be good. She could hear whispers behind her, soft at first, then growing louder. A few people chuckled, and she felt the heat rise in her cheeks. It was not the first time someone had laughed at her, but it still stung. She took a slow breath and reminded herself why she was here. She loved the piano. She had spent countless hours practicing in her small bedroom, learning songs by ear and by heart. Nobody had to see her play, and most days she preferred it that way. But something about today was different. Today she wanted to share a little of herself with the world, even if just a little. She stepped closer to the piano and ran her fingers along the edge of the keys. They were smooth, cool to the touch, and familiar. Felt like coming home. Her heart raced, but there was also a quiet thrill that made her feel alive. A group of people sitting nearby whispered among themselves. "Do you think she can play?" one asked, a hint of amusement in the voice. Another laughed softly. "Looks like she's never touched a piano before." Their words were not cruel, just dismissive, but they cut through her like tiny pricks. She felt a flicker of doubt creep in, but she shook her head and focused on the piano in front of her. She reminded herself that she didn't need anyone's approval. She was here for herself, for the music. The girl took another breath and sat down on the piano bench, creaked slightly under her weight. She positioned her fingers carefully over the keys, feeling each one beneath her fingertips. For a moment, nothing happened. The cafe noises seemed to fade away as she concentrated on the melody in her mind. She imagined the notes flowing, soft at first, then growing stronger, more confident. She could feel the music inside her, waiting to be released. She knew that once she started, she could let go of the nervousness and just play. Some of the onlookers continued to whisper and chuckle, but she paid them no mind. She had learned long ago that the world would always have opinions, but they did not have to define her. She closed her eyes for a brief second and let herself breathe. The laughter and whispers faded into the background. All that mattered was the connection between her and the piano, the way her fingers could speak what words sometimes could not. She could feel a sense of calm settling over her, replacing the nervous energy that had been buzzing through her. Then she pressed the first key softly, almost hesitantly. The note rang out clear and pure. She pressed another and another, building a simple melody. Some of the people watching scoffed quietly, thinking it was too simple, not impressive. But she did not mind. Every note she played carried her emotion, and that was enough for her. She felt the music starting to flow through her, gaining strength and confidence with each movement of her fingers. The melody she had imagined in her mind was beginning to take shape, and it felt magical. As she continued, she noticed the subtle change in the room. Some of the laughter faded, replaced by curious glances. Some people leaned forward, trying to catch the tune, trying to understand what she was playing. It was a small thing, but it gave her courage. She pressed her fingers harder against the keys, letting the music grow. The notes danced and swirled, carrying a gentle energy that seemed to lift the room ever so slightly. She could hear the melody in her mind, but now it was becoming real, and it felt alive. The girl's heart was pounding, but it was a different kind of excitement now. It was not fear or nervousness. It was the joy of creation, the thrill of sharing something beautiful. She remembered all the hours she had spent practicing alone, the time she had played for no one, just for herself, just to feel the music. And now, here she was, letting the music flow into the room, letting others hear it, whether they laughed or listened. She played a few more notes, each one stronger, more confident. Her body relaxed into the music, and for the first time, she felt truly free. The whispers around her had mostly stopped, replaced by a quiet attentiveness. People were beginning to realize that maybe, just maybe, she was more than they had expected. She smiled slightly, a little shy, but full of pride. She was doing something she loved, and that was enough. For the next few minutes, the girl continued to play, letting the melody grow and change. The room seemed to hold its breath as she moved from one note to another, each one carefully chosen, each one expressing something she could not put into words. She felt a sense of connection with the piano, with the music, and with herself. It was as if everything else had disappeared, and only the sound mattered. The people around her were no longer laughing. They were listening. They were watching. They were beginning to understand. And in that moment, she realized something important. It did not matter what anyone else thought or said. What mattered was that she had the courage to sit down, to touch the piano, and to let her music be heard. The laughter from before seemed distant now, almost meaningless. She was no longer the girl they had laughed at. She was a musician, a creator, someone who could take something simple, a few notes on a piano, and turn it into something that could move people. The first part of her journey had begun, and she felt ready for whatever came next. The girl sat at the piano, her hands hovering just above the keys, feeling the weight of the moment. The cafe, once full of chatter and laughter, now seemed to lean in with anticipation. Every eye in the room was on her, but she didn't let it scare her. She remembered why she was here, why she had wanted to play despite knowing some people might mock her. She loved music, and this piano had always felt like an old friend, waiting for her to tell it her story. She pressed down on a key, a soft, gentle note that filled the corner of the cafe. At first, it was quiet, almost hesitant, but it carried with it a sense of purpose. She thought of all the evenings spent practicing in her small room, when no one was around to judge her, when the only audience was her reflection in the mirror. The hours of repetition, of learning each note by heart, all came back to her now, reminding her that she was ready. She was capable. The whispers had not completely disappeared. A few people muttered quietly, unsure of what to make of her. Some still exchanged doubtful glances, certain that she would fumble. But she didn't look up. She didn't care. The music was hers, and she would play it the way she felt it, no matter what anyone else thought. Slowly, the melody began to take shape, simple at first, but growing more confident with every note. Her fingers moved with a rhythm that felt natural, almost like the piano had been waiting for her touch all this time. As she played, she remembered a teacher she had once had. They had told her that music was more than just notes. It was a language of the heart. That lesson came back vividly. Each note she struck was a word, each phrase a sentence, and together they told a story of hope, courage, and persistence. She let herself feel every emotion she had kept inside. The nervousness, the excitement, the desire to be seen for who she truly was. And as she let these feelings flow through her fingers, the music became richer, more alive. A few people who had been laughing earlier now leaned closer, curiosity replacing their mockery. Their expressions shifted subtly. They were beginning to realize that this was not just a child playing aimlessly on a piano. She had skill, yes, but more importantly, she had emotion, and that was something they hadn't expected. Their whispers quieted, replaced by a respectful silence. Even the cafe's regular musicians paused mid-conversation, drawn to the unexpected beauty of her playing. Her hands glided over the keys, moving from one octave to another, experimenting with soft and loud, slow and fast, each variation bringing a new feeling into the room. She imagined herself in a vast concert hall, the music bouncing off the walls and filling every corner. She imagined the people listening, their faces attentive, their hearts open. For a moment, the cafe was no longer just a small, busy room. It became a stage, and she the storyteller, sharing her heart through sound. Every note was deliberate, every pause meaningful. She played with intention, letting the quiet moments speak as loudly as the loud ones. There was a rhythm to her fingers, a pulse that seemed to resonate with the very air in the room. She could feel the audience's attention like a gentle pressure, but it didn't make her nervous anymore. It energized her. It made her want to give more, to reach deeper into herself and bring out every ounce of expression she could find. The girl's confidence grew with every passing minute. She remembered a friend once telling her that talent without courage was like a seed that never grew. She had courage now. She had dared to sit at the piano in front of strangers, to face their doubts and laughter, and she had not backed down. That courage fueled her fingers, making them fly over the keys with a fluidity that surprised even her. She was no longer playing just to test herself. She was playing to share a piece of herself with the world. Occasionally, she glanced at the audience, seeing the change in their faces. Some were smiling softly, moved by the music. Others had wide eyes, completely absorbed in the melody. She felt a wave of warmth and reassurance. This was why she played. Not for fame, not for applause, but for moments like this when music could connect people, even strangers, and make them feel something real. She realized that every note was a bridge, linking her heart to theirs, and it was a beautiful, powerful feeling. Time seemed to lose meaning as she continued. The outside world, the busy cafe, the people talking and moving, all faded into the background. There was only the music and her. She experimented with the melody, adding small variations, letting her emotions guide her. She remembered her earliest struggles, when she could barely play a simple song, and she smiled. All those small failures, all those hours of persistence, had led her to this exact moment. She was proud, not just of the music she was creating, but of the courage it had taken to reach this point. As she played, she noticed subtle signs of admiration in the audience. Someone nodded in rhythm with the music. Another person tapped their foot lightly, completely caught in the flow of her melody. She did not play for their recognition, but seeing their engagement filled her with a quiet joy. She felt understood, even if no words were spoken. Music had a way of doing that, speaking directly to the soul. Her mind wandered briefly to what might come next. Would she perform again? Could she play in front of larger crowds? She didn't know, and for now it didn't matter. The important thing was this moment, this music, this connection. She had faced doubt and laughter and had chosen to continue. She had embraced her passion despite fear. That alone felt like a triumph. Finally, she began to slow the pace of her playing, bringing the melody to a gentle conclusion. The notes lingered in the air, echoing softly as the cafe returned to its usual hum. She lifted her hands from the keys, her heart still racing but her spirit calm and content. She had done it. She had faced the mockery and turned it into something beautiful. She had shown herself, if not everyone else, what she was capable of. The audience reacted in small but meaningful ways. A few clapped quietly, some nodded in appreciation, and some simply smiled, understanding without words the effort and emotion she had put into the music. It was not a performance for fame or praise. It was a statement of courage, an affirmation of her love for music, and a promise to herself that she would continue, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. This was the second part of her journey, and it had already begun to shape the person she was becoming. The girl took a moment to catch her breath, letting her hands rest lightly on the keys. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and excitement. The cafe, once a place of noise and chatter, had become something entirely different. Every corner of the room seemed to hold its attention on her, and she could feel it. The energy of the people around her was subtle, yet powerful. They were no longer just bystanders. They were witnesses to something rare and delicate, a moment that would not be forgotten. Her eyes scanned the room briefly, noticing the shift in expressions. The laughter that had greeted her arrival had vanished. Instead, there were looks of curiosity, intrigue, and even admiration. Some leaned forward, as if trying to absorb every note she might play. A few people held their breath, unsure of whether to clap or remain silent, caught in a balance between anticipation and awe. It was a strange feeling, but not unpleasant. She realized that, in a way, the music had begun to speak for her, filling the spaces where words could not. With a gentle exhale, she returned to the piano, letting her fingers glide over the keys with renewed focus. The melody she had been playing before had been a warm-up, a way to ease herself into the room. Now she was ready to explore deeper, to push her own boundaries. She began to play with more confidence, adding subtle flourishes and changes in rhythm. The notes intertwined like threads in a tapestry, forming a pattern that was both intricate and fluid. Each sound seemed to resonate not only in the room but in her own heart, reinforcing the connection she felt with the piano. As she continued, she thought about the people who had doubted her. Their disbelief had once stung, but now it motivated her. Not out of spite, but because she wanted to show herself what she was capable of. The piano had always been her companion, the instrument through which she could express herself fully. She realized that it wasn't about proving anyone else wrong. It was about embracing her own potential and daring to let it shine. The audience, sensing the change, became completely still. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Phones were put down, and eyes followed the movement of her hands. Even the barista behind the counter paused while preparing drinks, caught in the unexpected beauty of her playing. There was a rare stillness that hung over the cafe, as though the music had created its own space within the room. It was intimate, even though the crowd was not small, and it felt almost sacred. She began experimenting with dynamics, allowing the soft passages to float gently through the air and the louder moments to strike with emotion. She could hear the shifts in the room, the tiny reactions of the audience, and it gave her courage. Every note she played became a conversation with those listening. She imagined telling them a story through music, one that needed no words. It was a story of persistence, of quiet determination, of the courage to take a small, simple step even when the world expected failure. Her fingers danced over the keys with increasing freedom. The melody evolved naturally, as though it had a life of its own. Sometimes she would pause, letting a single note linger and echo, and she noticed the way people responded, leaning in, holding their breath to hear the fading sound. Other times she played more rapidly, building excitement, weaving a rhythm that was both surprising and graceful. It was not just music. It was a performance born from her heart, and she could feel the room responding in kind. A few people in the back whispered to each other, trying to understand the skill behind her hands. She did not pay attention, but she could sense their admiration growing. The initial laughter had been replaced with awe. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakable. Her music had shifted their perception, not with words or arguments, but simply by being beautiful and authentic. The power of what she was doing was slowly becoming apparent to everyone present. The girl's mind wandered briefly to how far she had come. There had been countless nights of practice, sometimes late into the evening, fingers aching, eyes tired, but the joy of learning had kept her going. Those solitary moments had shaped her, prepared her for this very encounter. She felt grateful for every hour spent in quiet practice, for every challenge she had faced alone. They had given her the strength to stand here, to play, and to let the music carry her forward. Her melody began to change again, moving from a soft, lyrical section into a more intricate and expressive passage. The notes flowed like a river, sometimes rushing, sometimes slowing to a gentle trickle. She could feel the music reflecting her emotions, the nervousness fading into confidence, the doubt transforming into pride. The audience was completely captivated now. Their focus was unwavering, and she realized that for the first time, she truly felt the impact of her own music on others. She noticed a few people smiling, some tapping their fingers on the table in rhythm, others closing their eyes to absorb the sounds fully. The energy in the room had shifted entirely. It was no longer a casual cafe gathering but a shared experience. The music was bridging the gap between her and the audience, creating a connection that was real and tangible. She felt the weight of their attention, but it was a comforting weight, one that encouraged her to play even more freely. The girl allowed herself to experiment further, introducing subtle harmonies and unexpected shifts in tempo. The melody became richer, more layered, each note carefully chosen yet spontaneous. She felt a sense of exhilaration as she navigated the keys, her mind fully engaged, her heart fully invested. The music was alive, and she was its conduit. Every listener in the room seemed to sense the depth of feeling behind each phrase, and she could see it in their eyes. Curiosity, wonder, appreciation. Time seemed to stretch as she played. Minutes passed unnoticed, the world outside the cafe fading into the background. Her focus was absolute. She felt completely in sync with the piano, her hands moving as if guided by instinct. There was no fear, no hesitation, only music. She realized that this was what she had been striving for all along. A moment where she could forget herself and let the music speak entirely for her. And now she was living it. Gradually, she began to bring the music to a gentle close. The final notes lingered in the air, fading softly into silence. She lifted her hands, letting them hover above the keys for a moment before resting them on her lap. The room remained quiet for a heartbeat, as though no one wanted to break the spell. Then, slowly, small sounds of appreciation began to emerge, soft claps, a few murmurs of admiration. She smiled quietly, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and fulfillment. It had been more than just playing notes on a piano. It had been a journey of courage, of embracing her passion despite doubt and fear. The girl realized that she had changed in those few minutes. She had faced the laughter, ignored the whispers, and allowed herself to be seen through her music. It was a turning point, a moment that would stay with her forever, and she knew that this was just the beginning of something far greater than herself. As she stood up from the piano, she noticed people approaching, offering compliments and words of encouragement. She accepted them with quiet humility, feeling grateful but also proud. The experience had shown her that talent and courage, when combined, could create moments that moved people in ways words never could. The third part of her journey had been about finding her voice through music and realizing the power she held when she chose to embrace it fully. The girl took a deep breath and lowered herself onto the piano bench once more. The warmth she had felt earlier still lingered, a gentle encouragement that made her fingers tingle with anticipation. The room seemed quieter now, as if the cafe itself were waiting for what she would do next. She placed her hands lightly on the keys and let her mind wander through the music that had been forming in her imagination for days. She wasn't just playing notes anymore. She was telling a story, one that could reach the hearts of everyone in the room. The first notes she played were soft, almost tentative but full of feeling. They floated through the air like delicate whispers, drawing the attention of the audience immediately. People leaned forward in their seats, their expressions shifting from curiosity to wonder. Some closed their eyes, letting the melody fill their minds and imaginations. She could feel the energy of the room responding to her, a quiet, invisible connection that made her fingers move with even more confidence. Every key she pressed felt like a conversation, a word in a sentence that only music could write. As the melody grew, she allowed herself to explore deeper emotions. She thought about the laughter she had faced when she first approached the piano, about the doubt that had lingered in the air around her. But now that doubt felt distant. The music was her shield, her expression, her voice. She let her fingers dance over the keys, weaving patterns of sound that were both intricate and fluid. She experimented with volume and pace, letting some passages swell with intensity and others fade into gentle whispers. Each change was deliberate, expressing something that words could not capture. The audience watched in awe, many unaware of how captivated they had become. Conversations had completely stopped, and even the barista behind the counter moved more slowly, careful not to disturb the moment. Some people were leaning close to hear every note, others were sitting back, taking in the music as a whole. The cafe, once full of casual chatter, had transformed into a space of shared attention and quiet reverence. She could feel it, and it gave her courage to continue, to explore even more, to let the music flow without restraint. Her hands moved effortlessly over the keys, the melody evolving naturally. She introduced subtle harmonies that added depth and richness to the sound. The notes rose and fell like waves, carrying emotion through the room. There were moments of tension, where the music felt urgent and alive, and moments of calm, where it felt like the world itself had slowed to listen. She could sense the audience reacting to each change, their faces softening, eyes widening, hearts responding. It was a beautiful, shared experience that transcended words. As she played, memories of her long practice sessions at home came to mind. She remembered the countless nights spent alone, learning each note carefully, perfecting her technique. Those solitary hours had taught her patience and persistence, and now she realized how valuable they had been. The skills she had built in those quiet moments were allowing her to perform in front of strangers with poise and grace. She smiled faintly to herself, grateful for the effort she had put in, knowing it had led to this very moment. She began to play with more emotion, letting the music tell a story that was uniquely hers. Each phrase carried a sense of hope, of resilience, of quiet triumph over fear. She imagined the audience feeling the journey she had taken, understanding the courage it took to face the piano despite the laughter she had heard. It was a conversation without words, a connection that only music could create. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence, translating emotion into sound, creating a tapestry of melody that captivated everyone present. The girl noticed the subtle signs of awe in the room. Some people were nodding slowly, completely absorbed by the melody. Others were leaning back, eyes closed, letting the music wash over them. A few were even whispering to each other, marveling at the skill and feeling in her playing. She didn't need their praise. She played for the joy of music itself, but seeing their reactions brought her a quiet happiness. It reminded her that sharing something beautiful could create connections, even among strangers, and that her courage had made that possible. As she continued, she allowed herself to take risks. She experimented with dynamics, moving from gentle, soft passages to bold, powerful notes. She introduced unexpected shifts in rhythm and phrasing, keeping the music alive and unpredictable. Her hands moved with agility and grace, each movement a reflection of her creativity and passion. The melody became more intricate, more expressive, a true representation of her talent and heart. She could feel the room responding to her, a subtle, collective energy that encouraged her to continue pushing the boundaries of her performance. Time seemed to stretch as she played, the world outside the cafe fading completely. There was only the music and the connection she shared with the audience. She felt completely immersed, her mind and heart in perfect harmony with her hands and the piano. Each note was an expression of herself, a declaration of her courage, her love for music, and her willingness to face fear. The audience was no longer just watching. They were experiencing, feeling, and understanding something profound through her performance. Gradually, she began to bring the piece to a gentle conclusion. The final notes lingered in the air, soft and resonant, creating a sense of calm and closure. She lifted her hands from the keys, letting them hover briefly before resting them in her lap. The room remained quiet for a heartbeat, as though no one wanted to break the spell. Then, slowly, applause began to rise. It started quietly, a few soft claps, and grew steadily into a warm, appreciative sound that filled the cafe. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. The applause was not just for her skill, but for the courage and authenticity she had displayed. She had faced doubt and laughter and transformed it into something beautiful, something that touched the hearts of everyone present. People approached her afterward, offering words of encouragement and admiration. She accepted them with quiet humility, grateful for their recognition but aware that the true reward had been the music itself. This experience had strengthened her confidence and reminded her why she loved to play, why she had pursued her passion despite challenges. As she left the piano bench for a brief moment, she felt a renewed sense of determination. This was not the end. It was a continuation, a step forward in her journey as a musician and as a person willing to embrace her talents fully. The experience had shown her the power of perseverance, the joy of sharing one's passion, and the transformative effect of music on both the player and the listeners. She knew that this was only one chapter in her story, but it was a chapter that would stay with her forever, guiding her as she continued to grow and create. The fourth part of her journey had been about deepening her connection to the music, exploring her creativity, and realizing the impact her playing could have on others. It had been a lesson in courage, expression, and the quiet power of dedication. She had learned that music was not just about notes, but about emotion, connection, and the willingness to share one's inner world with those around. And as she looked around the cafe, seeing the smiles and attentive faces, she knew that her journey was far from over, and that many more moments of discovery, courage, and beauty awaited her. The girl felt a new wave of energy as she returned to the piano. The warmth from the previous performance still lingered, a quiet reminder that she could trust herself. The cafe, now familiar and almost comforting, seemed to embrace her presence. She settled onto the bench, her fingers hovering over the keys, as she let her mind wander through melodies she had been imagining. She had already shared part of her story through music, but now she wanted to take it further, to explore new emotions and let the piano carry them fully. She pressed the first key softly, and the sound resonated through the room. It was a gentle start, almost a whisper, but it held a promise. Her fingers moved carefully, building a melody that was both tender and expressive. She thought about the people in the audience, how their expressions had changed during her earlier performance. Some had laughed, some had doubted, but now they watched in wonder, leaning forward, listening intently. It was a powerful reminder of how music could change perception, how it could turn skepticism into admiration. The girl let the melody grow, adding layers and harmonies that enriched the sound. She experimented with rhythm, sometimes quick and lively, sometimes slow and thoughtful. Each movement of her fingers was deliberate, expressing emotion in a way words could never capture. She remembered the long hours of practice at home, the patience and dedication that had brought her to this moment. Those solitary evenings, filled with repetition and focus, had prepared her to play with confidence in front of strangers. Every note she played now carried the weight of that preparation, the proof of her determination. As the music developed, she allowed herself to feel the emotions she had kept hidden for so long. Nervousness, excitement, hope, and courage all intertwined, guiding her fingers over the keys. She realized that the music was not just for the audience. It was for her as well. It was a way to express feelings that had no other outlet, to communicate in a language that transcended words. The melody flowed naturally, each note leading to the next, telling a story that was uniquely hers. The audience was captivated. Conversations had stopped, phones were down, and eyes were focused on the girl and her piano. People leaned forward, listening to every note, absorbing the subtle shifts in dynamics and tempo. Some closed their eyes, letting the music carry them away, while others watched with rapt attention, amazed by the skill and emotion in her playing. It was a shared experience, a moment of connection that bridged the gap between performer and listener. She allowed the music to become more complex, introducing variations that challenged her technical abilities. Her fingers moved with agility, her hands flowing over the keys with confidence. The melody was no longer just a tune. It had become a story, a journey through different emotions and experiences. She played with intention, letting the music rise and fall, capturing the attention of everyone in the room. Each note was a reflection of her dedication, her passion, and her courage. As she continued, she noticed the subtle changes in the audience. Some people were nodding in rhythm, others were leaning back, completely absorbed. The initial laughter had completely vanished, replaced by a quiet admiration. The energy in the room had shifted, and she could feel it as she played. The music was no longer just a performance. It was a conversation, a shared understanding between her and those listening. She felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that her music had touched others in a meaningful way. The girl's mind wandered to the challenges she had faced in her journey. Doubts, fear, and criticism had often threatened to hold her back, but she had persisted. She remembered the moments of frustration when notes wouldn't come together, when progress seemed impossible. And yet, she had kept going, practicing tirelessly, believing in herself even when others did not. Now, all that effort was reflected in the music she played, in the confidence that radiated from her hands and heart. She began to explore the emotional range of her piece, moving from soft, reflective passages to bold, energetic sections. The The contrast created a sense of drama and depth, drawing the audience further into the story she was telling. Each note carried meaning, each phrase conveyed emotion. She felt a deep connection to the piano, as if it were an extension of herself, translating her thoughts and feelings into sound. The room responded, every listener attuned to the subtleties of her performance. Time seemed to stretch as she played. Minutes passed unnoticed, the outside world fading away completely. There was only the music, the piano, and the connection she shared with the audience. She felt completely immersed, her mind and heart aligned with her hands and the instrument. The melody flowed effortlessly, a living expression of her talent, passion, and courage. She realized that this was what she had been striving for all along. A moment where she could express herself fully, without fear, and share that expression with others. The audience was deeply moved. Some had tears in their eyes, others smiled softly, while a few whispered quietly to each other, marveling at the beauty of what they were hearing. The girl felt a quiet joy, knowing that she had created something meaningful. The applause that followed was not just for her technical skill, but for the courage, emotion, and authenticity she had displayed. It was a reminder that music could touch hearts in ways that words never could. As the final notes lingered in the air, she lifted her hands from the keys, letting the silence settle around her. The cafe slowly returned to its usual sounds, but something had changed. The atmosphere was richer, warmer, filled with a sense of shared experience. People approached her afterward, offering compliments and words of encouragement. She accepted them with humility, feeling grateful but also proud. She had faced doubt and laughter and turned it into something beautiful, something that resonated with everyone present. She realized that this performance had been a turning point. It had taught her the power of persistence, the importance of embracing one's passion, and the ability of music to connect people. She had shared a part of herself through the piano, and in doing so had found a deeper understanding of her own strength and courage. The journey was far from over, but this moment had strengthened her resolve and confidence. The fifth part of her story was about growth, exploration, and the deepening of her connection to music and her audience. She had faced challenges, embraced her emotions, and allowed her talent to shine fully. It was a lesson in courage, patience, and the beauty of self-expression. As she left the piano for a short break, she felt a sense of anticipation and excitement for what was to come next, knowing that the final part of her journey would bring everything together, celebrating the courage, skill, and passion she had shown. The girl returned to the piano for the final time, her heart steady but full of anticipation. She had already shared a journey through music, yet she felt there was more to express, a final chapter to bring closure and celebration to her experience. The room, now quiet and attentive, seemed to welcome her back. She settled onto the bench, her fingers hovering over the keys, feeling the familiar weight of possibility and promise. She began softly, letting the first notes float gently into the air. They were calm, deliberate, each one carrying a quiet confidence. She thought about everything that had led her here, the laughter, the doubt, the long hours of practice, the small victories, and the moments of frustration. Each note she played reflected a piece of that journey. It was a personal expression, but she also knew that the people listening were part of it too. They were sharing the moment, experiencing the story through the sound she created. The melody grew gradually, layering complexity over simplicity. She experimented with harmonies and rhythm, weaving them together to form a rich, textured sound. Her fingers moved with grace and precision, each movement intentional yet natural. She felt the music flowing through her, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. The audience was completely absorbed. Some had closed their eyes to fully immerse themselves in the sound, while others watched every motion of her hands, captivated by both skill and emotion. As she played, the girl allowed herself to feel deeply. She remembered the early days of learning, when each note felt like a challenge, when mistakes made her doubt her abilities. Now, all that practice, all that perseverance had culminated in this moment of mastery. She realized that the journey had been just as important as the performance itself. Each struggle had taught her patience, resilience, and the courage to continue even when others doubted her. The audience responded subtly at first, leaning in, soft smiles appearing on faces, heads nodding gently. The energy in the room shifted from curiosity to admiration, from doubt to wonder. People who had laughed at her initially now watched in awe, their skepticism replaced by respect and appreciation. She could sense the transformation, not through words but through presence, through the attentive silence and shared focus that enveloped the cafe. She began to explore the emotional depth of her music. Some passages were soft and reflective, evoking a sense of calm and nostalgia. Others were bold and vibrant, expressing joy, excitement, and triumph. Her hands moved with freedom, yet each note carried intention. The music was alive, telling a story that could be understood without language, connecting hearts through sound. She was no longer just playing for herself. She was sharing a piece of her soul with everyone present. Her mind wandered briefly to the future. Could she continue performing? Could she play for larger audiences, share her music beyond the walls of the cafe? She did not need immediate answers. For now, the moment itself was enough, and the music she created would carry her forward. The present was a gift, and she embraced it fully, letting each note express courage, determination, and the pure joy of creation. The melody evolved naturally, moving from gentle softness to rich intensity. She introduced subtle variations, creating a dynamic flow that kept listeners engaged and emotionally invested. The room seemed to pulse with the music, each listener responding uniquely, but collectively to the emotion she poured into every note. The connection between performer and audience felt tangible, a shared understanding that transcended speech. In that moment, the girl realized the power of her talent not just to impress, but to move, to inspire, and to bring people together. She reflected on how far she had come. From the first hesitant touch of the keys, through moments of fear and laughter, to this confident and expressive performance, her journey had been remarkable. She felt gratitude for every challenge she had faced, every hour spent practicing alone, every mistake that had taught her to persevere. These experiences had shaped her, and now they were evident in every note she played, in every expression that flowed through her hands. The audience remained entranced, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes, some simply listening in quiet admiration. The cafe had transformed from a place of casual conversation into a space of shared experience, where music spoke louder than words ever could. The girl felt a sense of fulfillment and purpose as she continued, knowing that her courage had created a moment of beauty that touched the hearts of those around her. She gradually began to bring the piece to its conclusion. The final notes lingered softly, echoing in the room, a gentle resonance that seemed to hang in the air. She lifted her hands slowly, letting them hover over the keys before resting them in her lap. The silence that followed was almost tangible, a collective breath held in appreciation and reflection. Then, slowly, the first claps began, quiet at first, then growing steadily into heartfelt applause. Smiles and murmurs of admiration filled the cafe, acknowledging both her talent and the courage it had taken to share it. The girl felt a wave of joy and gratitude. She had faced doubt, ignored laughter, and embraced her passion fully. The music had allowed her to express herself authentically and connect with others in a profound way. Words were unnecessary. The applause, the smiles, the attentive gazes were enough to convey the impact of her performance. She realized that her journey was not just about learning to play the piano, but about discovering her own strength, resilience, and capacity to inspire. As she stood and stepped away from the piano, people approached to offer compliments and encouragement. She received them with humility, feeling proud but not boastful. Her heart was full, and she understood that this experience would remain with her forever, a reminder of what courage, passion, and dedication could achieve. She had turned doubt into admiration, fear into expression, and a simple moment in a cafe into a memory that would linger for years. The sixth and final part of her journey had been about culmination, expression, and celebration. She had faced the challenges of performance, embraced her emotions, and allowed her talent and courage to shine fully. The experience reinforced the importance of perseverance, the joy of self-expression, and the power of music to create meaningful connections. She had astonished the audience, not just with skill, but with the depth of her heart and the authenticity of her performance. As she walked away from the piano, she felt a sense of completion, yet also anticipation for the future. Her journey with music was far from over, and the confidence she had gained would guide her through new challenges and opportunities. The cafe, once a place of casual visits and whispered laughter, had become a space of transformation, both for her and for those who witnessed her performance. She had proven, to herself and to the world, that courage and passion could overcome doubt, and that the simplest actions, guided by sincerity and heart, could create extraordinary moments. The story that began with laughter and doubt had ended in admiration, connection, and the quiet triumph of talent and determination.